Opus is a wholly unoriginal, empty film that's destined to be forgotten the second the credits roll. It feels like a bad Netflix series that you bounce off of after the first episode and never pick up again. There are attempts at meaningful symbolism and at commentary about the relationship between artists and critics, but it all pretty much falls flat on its face because it sticks to a formula so rigid, tired, and corny that I rolled and audibly laughed multiple times. Io Adebari plays a music critic at a sort of Rolling Stone or Pitchfork sort of magazine. She's struggling to make it as a writer. We see her pitching articles to her boss, Stan, who takes her idea and gives it to somebody else. She talks to a friend about being really frustrated that she just can't be taken seriously. And she's just struggling to make a name for herself at this magazine. One day, I don't know how to not start with one day. Like, how else do you introduce that? I still hate doing plot synopses. One day, rumors begin to circulate that legendary pop star from the 90s, Moretti, has resurfaced from a long hiatus. He invites a bunch of music journalists to come to this not so secret album release party at an undisclosed location. And Stan, Ariel's boss, gets an invite. But so does Ariel, which is the first of many mysteries that present themselves early on in the film. Long story short, Ariel, Stan, and these other music journalists are flown out to the middle of nowhere in the desert and then put on a bus where they're driven even further out to this compound. They have their phones taken, and the film is careful to show us that they are at least 4 hours from any sort of civilization. I wonder if that will come into play later. The film is basically about the time that these characters spend at this compound and the mysterious goings-on that happen. Like I said, I feel like I have seen so many Netflix or other streaming shows about like mysterious compounds where a huge amount of time is spent with just like weird shit happening. And that's basically what this is. Like, I can't say very much without spoiling things here, but like, based on that synopsis alone, you probably know exactly where this is going. And whatever you're assuming, you're probably correct. When I say it feels like a Netflix show, what I mean is that it is all just so half-baked and vapid. We have seen every single one of these things before. We have seen this exact plot laid out, except without the music tint to it, I guess. It plays out very similarly to a typical Black Mirror episode where a mystery is laid out, and the way that it's supposed to work is that layers of that mystery peel back and slowly reveal themselves. You have things that are hinted at over time. If it's done really well, this is sort of subtle and you don't see the twists coming. But if it's not done well, you get this, where it just feels again, half-baked and like it doesn't really know where it's going. The mystery here is just not that compelling, and the way that it communicates this mystery to the audience is through just throwing weird imagery at you over and over again. It's incredibly repetitive. It's one strange situation after another where I was not sure if I was supposed to be laughing, I often was, or if I was supposed to be taking this seriously and I was supposed to be worried. The tone here is actually pretty inconsistent, and I couldn't tell if I was watching a horror movie or a comedy. I should mention that I went into this not knowing a single thing about this. I intentionally avoided all trailers because I don't get that opportunity very often to go in totally cold. And if you go in totally cold, I genuinely didn't know how I was supposed to take what was happening on screen. So we get characters mysteriously disappearing. We get creepy, culty people following the main characters around and giving them weird looks. It's a formula, and it's not a very compelling one, and the pacing here is just completely off. Instead of layers of mystery being pulled back, or foreshadowing, or little hints of things to come, we get eventually a climax where the entire mystery is just revealed to you all at once in a way that is super anticlimactic and is basically just confirming all of the most obvious hunches you probably already had as the viewer. There's no real buildup of tension. There isn't this feeling that like, oh, some big reveal is coming. It's just sort of dropped in your lap, and it is incredibly lame. Predictably, Ariel is the only person in the entire film who thinks that anything suspicious might be going on. All of the other characters are just completely ignoring all of the weirdness that's happening. So at one point, she tries to kind of rally the other characters to see that something weird is going on and to come together to escape. And she tries to escape herself, and it just doesn't go anywhere. And then on the next scene, all the shit hits the fan and we learn what's really going on, which again could not be less interesting. There is an attempt at the end of the film to sort of retroactively create this master plan on the part of the villain to make it seem like everything that was happening was actually part of a bigger intentional scheme. And actually, I will say that that idea is actually really interesting. In this epilogue where the John Malkovich character, who I'll talk about a little bit later, tells Ariel about this grand plan and the way that what she's done has fit directly into his plan. Like, there's an idea there that I think is really interesting, but by the time we get there, we've already been so let down by the initial reveal that it's far too little and too late, and it really just doesn't land at all. The film weirdly has a cast of actors in it who elevate just about everything that they're in. Io Adebari is obviously incredible in everything, and she's faultless. There's nothing that she can really be blamed for here. The film just doesn't give her anything to do. She is sort of just a bland, straight man to all of the weirdness that's happening. She's sort of just the avatar of the audience, and it doesn't give her any room to do her thing. I love Murray Bartlett in just about everything he does too. He's one of my favorite actors working right now, at least in TV, and his character is the same story. There's just really nothing to him. He is completely one-dimensional. The role doesn't give Murray Bartlett any room to inject any humor, any additional characterization. It's just he is a guy, like the only thing we know about him is that he is Ariel's boss, and that's pretty much it. And there's other supporting actors here too, who all are doing their best, but again, take a back seat to the shock imagery and all the weirdness that's going on, and the very larger-than-life personality of Moretti, who is played by John Malkovich. John Malkovich is clearly the best thing about this movie. He is being appropriately Malkovichian here, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if this character was actually written specifically for him. It feels tailor-made for his brand of weirdness. Again, though, kind of the issue with this performance and an issue with the first half of the film is that he is just almost, he's weird to the point of being very funny at times, where I'm genuinely not sure what kind of character I'm supposed to think this guy is. Is he supposed to be sinister and scary, or is he supposed to be purely comedic? But either way, he's clearly having a lot of fun with it, and he almost makes this movie worth sitting through. Almost. The climax of this film is clearly trying to say something about art and artists and critics and art journalists and the tense relationship and sort of symbiosis that they seem to have. Moretti gives these monologues about the ways that he has been mistreated by music journalists, or the ways that other great artists have been mistreated by journalists, and it's sort of his justification for all of the weirdness that's happening. The problem is that this motivation could have been anything. By the time we get to this realization of what Moretti's real motivations are here, we have already lost interest, because the setup is just so nonsensical and just pointless. There's really very little connection to the weirdness that's happening and these motivations. We find out that Moretti has sort of founded some kind of religion, some kind of philosophy that is governing everything that's happening at this compound, but it's not terribly interesting because it is kept so vague. We're never really told what exactly the belief system of these people is. We're given it in little hints here or there, but it never comes together as something that's coherent, and so for me, I just didn't care, and I love occult shit. I love weird, spooky, cloaked people doing weird, spooky shit. But there just wasn't enough for me to latch onto here. So going back to that nonsensical setup, one thing that had me laughing to myself almost immediately in this film is the fact that the film seems to understand literally nothing about the modern music industry in 2025. First of all, the idea that an aging pop star from the 90s coming back to release a new album is this national event that captures the excitement of the entire nation and that every news outlet is covering is just so absurd to me. Like, that is just not how the music industry works in 2025. You couldn't think of a single artist exist right now who you could point to and be like, oh, if they came back, this would be that big of a deal. Like, that's just not how it works. It's too saturated now. Why does Moretti invite a bunch of print journalists to come to this event? Why is there no stand-in for someone like Anthony Fantano, who's an incredibly influential figure in the space? Why is it all these like legacy media people who do not have very much influence in the music industry in 2025? These are not the people we're going to see what we should listen to. Why is there no mention of like a TikTok or something like that, which is where things really do pick up viral momentum like that? This entire film doesn't even seem to be aware that the internet exists, to be honest. It doesn't seem to understand that social media is a thing, and it just was baffling to me. The one kind of acknowledgement we have of like internet culture existing in the world of this movie is the fact that one of the people who was invited is an influencer. But really the only point of this person being an influencer is just to elicit a groan from the audience. Like, we're meant to not take this person seriously. And that, to me, tells me so much about the headspace of this movie and who's writing this movie, frankly. So look, everything I'm describing is camp, right? Like, I found myself actually having a good time during the setup of this movie because it just was so absurd that I genuinely was wondering if I was watching some sort of parody. Like, it really feels like one of those Will Ferrell 2000s era, you know, absurdist comedies where he's playing some sort of larger than life cultural figure and everybody fawns over him and is obsessed with him for reasons that are totally incomprehensible to the audience. That's really what this film felt like. It felt so larger than life and so disconnected from reality and from the culture that it's attempting to comment on that I couldn't tell, is this a parody or not? But by the end, it's pretty clear this is going for just like straight horror with a couple of actually intentional attempts at humor here and there, but this is a straightforward horror movie at the end of the day, or at least an attempt at a horror movie. Another thing about this movie that's kind of camp to me in that it's just horrible is the unbelievably sloppy exposition at the beginning of this film. There is this scene where Ariel is sitting down with a friend and they're like eating sushi, where they're just talking through the entire backstory of this character, and there is no attempt to hide that this is exposition. They are just saying Ariel's character motivations to us in real time. Ariel's friend says something to the effect of, you know, oh, you can't write anything good because you haven't really experienced anything in life yet. And again, so obvious what that's leading to that my eyes roll to the back of my head. And again, that's another example of how Netflixy this movie feels. I can't tell you how many Netflix shows I've just turned off because the exposition at the beginning, the setup of everything, the introduction of all the characters was just so sloppy and had no attempt to, you know, tell it in an intuitive way and just explains directly to you what's happening and what you're supposed to feel about everything that's happening on screen. There's this like incredibly corny montage where we see a bunch of like Gen Z 20-somethings singing and dancing to Moretti's big pop song from the 90s, which first of all makes no sense. It just feels like this very like hello fellow kids situation where the film is trying to convince us that this 50-something-year-old aging pop star it actually is a huge deal to Zoomers for some reason. And this montage is a choice that just feels so insecure on the part of the writer here, that they knew that this wasn't believable. They knew that they needed to spend some extra time to try to convince the audience that like, no, it does make sense that this guy is popular. Look, all these people like the song, see? In fact, outside of the compound, there's like a fence that they go through and then they lock the fence behind them. And in front of the fence are a bunch of cars parked out of super fans, and every single one of them is like 23 years old. There's this weird attempt throughout the film to just really beat into the head of the audience the fact that, no, this guy's actually really relevant. It doesn't make sense that he's relevant, but no, he is the biggest pop star in the world and has obsessive 20-year-old fans following him everywhere. And then there's this compound where the whole thing takes place. And this place literally feels like you went into ChatGPT and asked it to describe a stereotypical culty compound and to spit out a bunch of like random mysterious happenings that the characters will go through here. And it's hard to make a compelling mystery out of any of this because the film is just telegraphing so fucking hard hard that there's just something not right here from the first second that you arrive or that the characters arrive. And all of the weird things that happen just feel entirely arbitrary and random. They happen in an order that doesn't make any sense. There isn't this like escalation of like things keep getting weirder. No, some of the weirdest shit happens right away, and then some of the most mundane things happen right before the big climactic finale. And none of it has any purpose other than just to say to the audience, hey, isn't this weird, you guys? So my theory about this film and other films like this is that the writer had a very specific situation that he wanted to put these characters into, a specific concept that he wanted to explore, but he didn't really think about how to get there. So instead of starting with an interesting situation that is the basis of the film, he starts with an interesting situation that is the conclusion and tries to work backwards from it. He tries to basically put a interesting, compelling answer to a mystery in a box and then create a bunch of narrative doors that you have to go through to get to that answer. And so that's why all of it feels so arbitrary, because the purpose of every bit of this mystery is just to slow you down from getting to that reveal at the end, to basically put boundaries between you and the answer to the mystery. And like I said, that mystery that he does get to is actually kind of interesting. It's actually kind of clever. I think it could have been satisfying if it had a stronger foundation behind it. But because I feel like it was so clearly written with that idea in mind and then worked to backwards, that reveal almost feels like the opposite. It feels like they thought of it at the last second. It feels so disconnected from what happened because they didn't do enough work to really draw those connections between this chain of events. And unfortunately, that's most of the movie. Most of the movie is setup. And unfortunately, that setup is just ridiculous and repetitive and pointless. The film is literally like 80% setup and then 10% reveal, 10% really bad exposition, essentially. And it wasn't until that epilogue at the very end where we have any idea what's actually happening here. So yeah, unfortunately, this is a movie that just completely fell apart for me. It's got a lot of like great actors here who are great in everything, who just are not able to right the ship. I don't think anybody could have. I will say that this is a movie that does almost get to that level of like so bad it's good. There are moments here that are really fun to watch because they are just so bad and out of touch. And there's some very gory, shocking imagery towards the end that I also found myself laughing at because by that point I was already so beyond caring. And so it was just me giggling at these horrible, gratuitous effects going on. And these, there's a lot of like weird makeup and prosthetics that were just like, what are you doing, film? We've gone so far off the rails at this point. But I just think it is too repetitive and too uninspired and too just dull to kind of be so bad it's good territory here. Watch a couple scenes online if you want, but I really don't think this is worth anybody's time, unfortunately. And that's all I have for you. I, again, don't really know how to end videos, but thank you for watching my video as I attempt to build this channel. It's been a lot of fun so far, and I hope that you'll stick around as I review some more stuff. All right. Thanks. Bye. I don't know if I like that.